Is
How you,
it? It's recording. Good. I hope so. Unless,
one, two, one.
yeah, it's recording. Okay.
Are you in Manhattan right now?
No, I'm in Brooklyn.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Wow, nice.
Yeah, I've been here 18 years. And the last time, well, one of the times I saw you, we went to your studio and you had a bunch of great guitars. And I'm having trouble remembering exactly when or how that happened. Like, I know I was probably playing LA, but did you come and get me and take me to your place, or did I come with a buddy?
You were with a friend,
Yeah, probably Dave Boat.
right? You reached out to me and said, "Hey, I want to come over and say hi." And I was like, "Great," because I'd heard about you, but we hadn't met. And you came by the studio with a friend, and we hung out at my studio. That was in Burbank.
Uh huh.
Yeah,
Do you
just
still have that?
well, I have the studio where I'm at right now. It's now at my home in Glendale. Um, I was at that studio that you came to for over 10 years. And as the music business, the budgets declined, I would do one Dwight record and it would pay my rent for like 2 years, right?
Right.
So after that kind of fell apart, it was like, it was expensive. Every month I needed to make 2,000, 2,500 bucks to open the doors, right? It was what it
Yeah.
cost. So my wife's an engineer and we said, the most important thing we need is a studio because we're not going to get hired to produce or engineer and then pay money for a studio. We won't make any money. So basically, I moved to my house, and I have a 4-car garage that I turned into a like 1,000-foot studio. So I'm in the studio now in my backyard, and I've been here about 10 years.
Nice. Well, I mean, I don't know if I want to make this formal, but I want to say, like, for me, um, I mean, hearing you, I don't know. I have some facts written down, so I'm not disrespectful. I guess I have Guitars and Cadillacs came out in '86, and I can't remember exactly what the first time I heard you, but I remember it was like a shining light for me. The first thing I heard that was like a shining light was the Pretender single, Ohio.
Right.
And at the time, it was like Randy Rhoads was big, and guys like that, and right hand tapping. And I remember I was teaching around that time in at Ceremony Shopping Center, like in the back in a little room, and I had this finger tapping book, and I was like, man, I'm not feeling this. But I was trying to, make people happy. And I heard Ohio, and I was like, oh, that's a good sign, that I'm not totally antiquated already. I mean, and then I heard you and in Dwight Yoakam, and it was like official that this had happened. And to this day, I still play a couple of things, and somewhere in my mind, and a percentage, like 15%, you'll pop in my head. You know how that is. Like if you learn a lick from somebody when you're 18 years old, 30
Absolutely.
years later, you're still thinking of them. And I have phrases that I play that I think, of you.
Oh,
Um,
I'm honored.
and last but not least, I remember, and I wish I knew, more because we're friends, and I respect your playing, and we've played together. I actually have something to say about that, but it's your interview. But last but not least was that it. God, no, I forgot my point. I'm just so excited. Oh yeah, that you guys at the time, I remember thinking of you as punk, like because it was so different. It was like in the LA punk scene.
Right.
And I'm just giving, listeners or watchers or whatever it is a context, but it's an absolute thrill to be able to do this, and thanks so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
So I want to ask, like, if you don't mind, you were born in Detroit.
Right.
Tell me about that. Like, were you there for a while?
Yes, I was born in 1948. So my parents were auto workers. My mother came from Colorado. She was born to Italian immigrants, and she moved to Detroit to work in the auto factory. My father came from the South to work in the auto factory, and neither of them finished high school, but they had that 50s middle class life going on when Eisenhower was president, and things were post-war. I went to school there up till I was about 19, 20 years old. I started traveling a little bit, and got out of high school and had some shitty jobs, went to art school for a year, and then started traveling. My mother retired. My dad died when I was 5, so it was just me and my mom. My mom retired from Chrysler's, and she moved to Phoenix, Arizona when I was like 19 years old. So I started going in the wintertime. Me and a buddy, like whoever I was hanging out with, we would get what was called a drive-away car, which was we could drive the car for somebody, and they would give you 3 days and a gas allowance to a destination. So we would get a drive-away car, go to Phoenix, spend the winter in Phoenix with my mom, and then I'd go back for the summers in Detroit. So I did that for a couple of years when I was 21. And I was playing music then, of course, and so we put bands together. We had a band together in Arizona, and the last time I went was 71 to 72. I decided not to go back to Detroit, so I spent a year and a half in Phoenix, had a band. It was a blues-oriented band with horns in it, and we were young guys. We were, 21, 22, 23, so we were what we were musically, and moderately uneducated musicians. But we had a great time, and we played, and we had a lot of fun, and we had a lot of heart. And I ended up being there until the spring of 72, when myself and the band broke up. Myself and a bass player felt we had outgrown Phoenix, and we were going to move to Los Angeles because Memphis, Austin, and New York were too far away. So we went, we'll go to the next big city. So we got in a Volkswagen bus, May of 72, drove to Los Angeles, slept in the bus for 2 weeks till we didn't have a place to live, and started going to jam sessions. And that's really how it started.
Yeah, that took some guts, even if you were young and dumb. It still took guts. Now, I'm kind of curious. I thought Detroit, and I don't know it as well as you, but I thought that would be more Motown or something like that. And I'll start before, how'd you start playing country with, like, who inspired you to play guitar?
Well, first, real quickly about Detroit. In 1959, they built a fairly extensive freeway system in downtown Detroit, and they tore down the 2-block area where all the blues clubs were.
Yeah.
So it was a spot. Detroit was definitely on the spot of like Chicago guys that were blues club guys, the Muddy Waters types. They were playing Detroit, Cleveland, Milwaukee. They were part of that Rust Belt circuit because they could just drive over in a car, in a station wagon or a car, and do gigs. And so after that area never got rebuilt. But Detroit had a strong blues, strong jazz. Yusef Lateef and some other guys were from Detroit. There were jazz clubs. And then, of course, Motown, which is totally amazing, was a big part of it. And so we had that. And then take into consideration that because of the auto factories, a lot of poor whites came north to work in the auto factories. So there was a burgeoning country music scene. There was honky-tonks there. There was hardcore white people, gravel parking lot, get punched in the face, shot in a beer, joints, playing country music. So it was a great melting pot to grow up. Now, I wasn't as aware of the country music, although after my father passed, we didn't have as much country music in the house, but we had it in the house. The Grand Ole Opry was on television. I heard it on the radio, and I heard it growing up. But I gravitated towards blues, towards playing blues. And the biggest influence, this is a pretty funny kind of ironic, I guess, but I was attracted to Elvis Presley. So when you're a kid, especially in the 50s, your aunts and uncles would ask you, what do you want to be when you get big? And without having 3 TV stations, 2 radio stations, and maybe Look magazine or Life magazine, you didn't know a lot. So you could say, I want to be a doctor. I want to be a policeman. I want to be, you didn't even know that you could be a lawyer. And I think I wanted to be, initially, I wanted to be in the Navy and I wanted to be an artist. So that's what I would say till I saw Elvis Presley. And then I went, I want to be that guy. That's the job I want, Elvis Presley. Now, my theory is this. Every so many decades, we have an Elvis, we have a Beatles, we have a Bruce Springsteen, we have a Kurt Cobain, somebody that attracts that part of the society, not unlike you and I that are like ate up with music and go, I'm going there, it's a magnet. So Elvis was my magnet, but I felt that everybody had one of those. And pretty soon I realized I tried, but I couldn't be Elvis. So it's like, okay, but the next best thing, the guitar player, right? And you work your way down. Some of your buddies couldn't be the guitar player, so they were the bass player. They couldn't be the bass player, so they became the drummer. Now I'm getting in trouble because the drummers are going to, when they hear it, they're going to get mad at me. And then the last thing you could be is a guy that hung out and sold his T-shirts. The worst thing you could be is his attorney. So there, I got that covered. So I wanted to be Elvis. I ended up being Scotty Moore. I saw Elvis. I saw the guitar, but the sound was Scotty. Mm-hmm. Very cool. I got to meet Scotty Moore, which was huge for me. I got to shake hands with him and tell him he was, my influence. And if you've seen the guitar that I play now, it's this PA1 by Reverend, which is a semi-hollow body. It initially has two P90s, and it looks like a Scotty guitar. Mm-hmm. So many years later, although I'm a telly guy, I'm ending up talking about my number one guy that got me there, and I'm known for playing blues and country, like in the cracks. So I'm playing, and I'm kind of became an old man Scotty Moore. So I feel I achieved it.
No, that's great, and it I feel myself kind of going full circle too in some ways, like, and a lot of the music. It's interesting because I think about what you said a lot, like how at least, and I didn't know it, but you're a little older than me, and when I Googled it, I was looking forward to it because I was like, Pete was born in the sweet spot, like, Elvis, the Beatles, Hendrix. I was aware of all that, but I was like, 7 in 1965. But I wanted to say, gosh, I'm excited and I'm losing my train of thought. Oh yeah, that the void I grew up in without internet, like just to find music was such an effort. And I remember in my neighborhood, it was like Montrose, maybe Neil Young, maybe Led Zeppelin, and Black Sabbath, Paranoid. And to dig took a lot of effort, and I remember I'd get a record and see, oh, this guy's on it, I'll get his record. But I've said this before, I bought records, and I don't want to talk too much, but I bought records solely based on how long the tracks were. Like, I'd go through and I'd go, oh, there's only 2 songs on this record, completely blind. And I got John Coltrane live in Japan, Larry Coryell, this weird Larry Coryell record called Barefoot Boy, that's pretty good. And something else, I got really lucky. I did get like Rare Earth Live, which was kind of a clinker. But that's how I ended up finding Eric Clapton, Derek and the Dominoes. But the void is hard to express without, first you don't want to sound like a crabby old guy or, I walked 10 miles in snow to school. But just hearing and finding music was really difficult.
Oh, yeah.
So anyway, so what got you into country guitar? Was it necessity or was it, a love or just, I don't know. I don't want to answer, but
I think it's the love of the guitar. I love playing guitar. Once I started playing guitar, I was ate up with it. Mm-hmm. I wanted to be good. I wanted to play, first it was, Bob Dylan. I bought my first guitar when I was 16. And I started learning Bob Dylan songs because they were kind of easy and folky. But then, like what you said, you could read the Bob Dylan, the early records, and go back to Bucka White and all the guys. He listened to everybody. So you start researching them. you get the first Paul Butterfield album. He talks about Sonny Boy Williamson. Who's Sonny Boy Williamson?
Yeah.
Rolling Stones. They go Bo Diddley. Now I knew Bo Diddley from television, but I got like in the '60s, I got a lot of influence, and I wasn't into the rock so much. I was really into the blues guys and the folk blues guys, and so I was ate up by playing guitar. I love playing the guitar. And when I got to Los Angeles, Sweetheart of the Rodeo by the Byrds came out. So now here were peers, guys that were close to my age, playing country music in their fashion with youthful exuberance, right? Mm-hmm. And then Taj Mahal did 6 Days on the Road with Jesse Ed Davis. And it's that major pentatonic working instead of the minor pen, mm-hmm. that thing in your ear where you go, wow, oh, it sounds almost like a steel guitar. That's cool. It was so attractive. So the music, and I got into the band, and then, Dylan made Nashville Skyline. We listened to the band a lot. And so that music was in the cracks. And so I started playing that type of music, started to be exploring major pentatonics, and very like, that was in Phoenix. And then I moved to Los Angeles. And when I got to Los Angeles, I was playing Stone Blues for a while, but a friend of mine, I got a job at a music store. That was always a big fantasy, right? Like, I need a gig. Wow, it'd be great to work at a music store. I could play guitar all day, So I got a job at a really hip music store. It was sort of like a vintage store before they even existed. And it was in a little house. Everything about it was awkward. There was no cash register. You'd go to the owner and he'd make change, but all the cats were there, all the heavy cats. He was a sax player. So all Bud Shank and all these guys that were heavy, Ernie Watts, they were all coming there looking for the cool vintage Selmer, whatever, the Sunburst Stratocaster, whatever. They were looking for the Sunburst saxophone. And so I got to meet these guys, and I got to see, a different style. And I was like totally into B.B. King by then. So it was like 335. The guy came in one day and he was doing like Roy Buchanan stuff. And I'm like, what is that? That's the coolest shit I've heard. So Sweethearts Rodeo came out. All those records came out. Then Graham Parsons came out. And it sort of became like this alternative country hipness, right? And like Graham used Burton and he used some legit guys. But the body of the band were young guys that were playing with abandon. And so I wanted to make a living playing guitar, and I was playing blues. And after a while, you're 23, 24 years old. It's kind of hard to convince people that you're singing about picking cotton. It's right. It's not, and I hate to say this, but I'm not sure that white people can play blues. I think white people can play Allman Brother blues because they invented it. But I can't be Johnny Shines. I can't be Robert Lockwood. I don't have their life experience. And if you're going to play with heart and emotion, that comes from your life experience. So country music is totally comfortable. It's comfortable. It wasn't comfortable at 21 because I had to go into a redneck bar where somebody was going to start a fist fight. And, the environment was aggressive. But the music feels comfortable to me. And so I got to explore it from a cultural perspective. It was like, it was like white man music, in a weird way. It was like, oh, this sort of feels the feel to cop the feel was easier. It wasn't a challenge. As I get older, and I don't know if you experience this, but as I get older, I love playing blues. I love playing bluesy. I love playing bluesy jazzy, but it's difficult. It's really hard. You try to play like Freddie King. When you listen to Freddie King and you go, oh yeah, I get all the notes. He's not playing any notes, but it's like, can you really play like Freddie King? Man, it's like, Albert King. Everybody copies Albert King. Stevie Ray Vaughan was great at copying Albert King. You put them side by side when they played together, and it's like, dude, just, get a whiff of it, but you can't go there. You can't go there. So it's one of those things that's just super difficult. So I spent, even probably by the time I'd met you, I was spending more time going my own way, whether it was bluesy, jazz, country, whatever. Country, I sort of went my own way. But a friend of mine, I'm getting long-winded here. I worked at a music store, And a friend of mine, this bass player, Bob Gross, and he said, "Hey, man, you like guitar?" And I go, "Yeah." And he said, "I'm playing this country bar with a really cool band, and why don't you come out and see us?" And I was like, "Oh, okay, where is it?" He told me where it was. And I didn't go to bars because growing up in Detroit, bars, white people, blue collar bars, that was where you were going to get in a fight. It was fist fight. They were rough, really rough bars. And I wasn't a drinker. So, and I didn't stay in my town long enough to be like, if I was 23 or 24 in my town, I'd start going to bars. I'd see the kids I went to high school with, you know, there's a little more comfort level, but I didn't have that experience because I left. So he said, "Come to see us play." So I went to see this band under the guise of it was a country band at a country bar. I sat in the back all by myself, drank a Coke. And one of the guitar players was Jerry Donahue, which you know Jerry.
Yeah, well,
And so
underrated in my opinion.
oh yeah, not enough people know about him. Jerry Donahue was one of the guitar players. Another guy named Ernie who was really good. There were some other cats that were good in the band that I don't remember that if I mentioned we may know. But I watched them play, and they were like doing faux steel licks. They were doing mandolin-y stuff. They were doing banjo fit rolls. Then they'd play a Chuck Berry. Then they'd play a Western swing. So they played jazz. And I'm like, this is a plethora of music where if you did a blues gig, you played minor pentatonic all night, right? So I'm like, wow, there's a lot of music being played. And it opened my mind up to what I could do as a guitar player under the umbrella of country music. So, because I'm still learning how to play. So, and I'm thinking if I get a country gig, I'll be able to play a blues every set. I'll be able to work on all my Chuck Berry stuff. I'll be able to play jazz over the Western swing. I'll get to practice my James Burton because Albert Lee was unthinkable at that time. I was like, I'll never play like that. So it's like, I'll get to practice my James Burton and I get to come up with cool steel licks and play country stuff and get into this major where the 5 chord's a major. It's not a dominant. So it's actually a key change. You know, when we go to the 5, it's not a dominant. So how do I navigate that, right? And so it was out of the love of guitar that attracted me to that. The records inspired me. Then when I saw what I could do in a bar, it was like, I'm going that way. I didn't know I was going to be a country guitar player. I just was like going to learn more about guitar.
Yeah, especially seeing people like, you know, Jerry Donahue, and you see, oh, well, that's the new bar. In some ways, our experience, you know, is linear because, you know, I was blues. And yeah, around 21, 22, I got Merle Haggard live in Muskogee and heard if I had left it up to you, it would all be over now. Wow. And I think I was going through something like that. Like I really liked this girl and she didn't like me that much. And, you know, some days she did, some days she didn't. And I remember that song just called my name and, you know, I understood every word. Like where with Muddy Waters, and I still love Muddy Waters, I kind of don't understand every word. I mean, audibly I do, but, you know, I didn't know what a mojo was or any of that. And so, you know, when you say it's white man's music, I get what you mean, but it's almost like just, for me, it was like a growing up man's music.
Yes.
You know, and the experience, especially in some of, you know, the eras, I mean, some, even now, some country music I don't relate to, but, you know, it was like, yeah, that's what I'm going through. So I understand. And that made me do that transition too and really love it. And I could move this scale down to here and fake my way through it. You know, then it gets hard when you stop doing that.
Yeah.
So I'm going to ask one of my weird questions. This isn't just a taste. I mean, I have a few, but is there anything you don't like about the guitar?
The only thing that I didn't like about the guitar was that it was pretty consistently out of tune.
Yeah.
It's inherently out of tune. But I found this thing called Earvana, not Nirvana, Earvana. It's Earvana, and it's a nut. It's a nut that goes on the guitar and solves the tuning problem.
And it's not that Bud Sheeton or what?
No, Buzzy Featon. Buzzy Featon's worked when you played down here.
Mhm.
But when you played like you take a C chord and bar a C chord like
Mhm.
way up,
Mhm.
it's way out of tune because it's a stretch tuning like on piano.
So what does Irvana do?
They compensate the nut, and you just replace your nut with the Irvana nut, and they
Wow.
compensate it, and the whole guitar's like once it's tuned, it's tuned. So I don't I don't have any. I love guitar.
Mhm.
When people back in the day when you were playing the honky tonks and people would go, "Let me take your picture," I go, "Yeah, but you got to take a picture of my guitar." I got pictures of my guitar next to beer bottles, garbage cans, leaning against the wall. I love looking at pictures of my
Me too.
guitar. I love my guitar. I love
Yeah.
them all.
I mean, to give you an idea, like, I mean, it's so obvious that we love guitar. I mean, I've had this telly for 30 years and I still like look at it kind of hypnotized. Okay. Um, One of the things I don't like about the guitar is the tuning. Like a diminished chord on the top four strings. To replicate that, you have a different fingering on strings 5 through 2, and then a different fingering on string 6 through 3 that I probably don't know after playing for 45 years. And sometimes that kind of bugs me. Like that makes me think the guitar's hard. But what you said, like, yeah, and the other thing is my D chord hasn't been in tune for 30 years, you know. But it's why I asked. I don't know. It's just not a.
You
Um,
want it. You don't want that B in there. You don't want that third. You want all fourths. You don't want that third.
so,
And yeah, it is kooky. Sometimes you can. Sometimes you can just force the issue. Just
well, some
change.
guys do it. Like Stanley Jordan tunes his guitar in fourths, and I've never done it, but I bet there's a big loss. You know.
No, I couldn't do that.
Yeah, yeah, and I don't want to sound forcey.
Right? No, no. I'm saying you could just continue to play the cool thing about guitar. I studied with Howard Roberts, and it's all patterns. The
Mhm.
cool thing about guitar is its patterns. Prior to Howard Roberts, in the early days learning guitar, it wasn't a legitimate instrument. It was because it wasn't an orchestra instrument, so they didn't consider it legitimate. And when they taught you, and you went to USC or college, you had to play piano. And you could. Some guys had classical guitar you could learn, but you played piano to be a guitar major. And it was like, I don't want to do this. The piano has black keys. We don't have black keys. We
Yeah.
got patterns. So it's like it's just vertical and horizontal. It's like, dude, if I play,
Yeah, yeah.
I'm pattern crazy, man. And Howard Roberts would come up with these. Here's an X pattern, and he drove it out that he just liked, and he goes, "You know why I play this? Because I like how it sounds." He would not. He later he'd tell you, "Well, you got a flat five, you got this, you got he'd tell you why it worked." But initially, it was because he liked how it sounded.
I got Howard Roberts as a dirty guitar player when I was 15 years old. My and man, I still think that's like one of the great jazz records. But I must say his column in the back of Guitar Player magazine, like I never understood it ever. And about 2 years ago, I found my old Guitar Player magazines, and I was like, "Oh yeah, Howard Roberts. I'll understand it now because I'm
Right.
Jim." And I read it, and I was like, "I still have no idea." Do you know what I'm?
Yeah, no, he's a heady cat, man. He
Yeah.
was as great of a guitar player because Howard was a great reader. Howard was part of the Wrecking Crew.
Mhm,
Howard could play a legit pop, mamas and papas
mhm.
session, and then at night go to play chamber orchestra music with a quartet. He could do it all. Okay, and as a player unto his own, he was a weird dude. He was a weird, wacky cat, man, and he was pushing the boundaries of music. But he was a genius as an educator.
Uh-huh.
Passing it on, he was a true genius. The stuff he thought up was genius. It was brilliant on how he educated because he simplified it for guitar players initially. I mean, now the curriculum has changed at Musicians Institute and it's different. But when it was GIT, he could take that idea that he taught to guitar and he could apply it to almost every instrument. But guitar and bass were specifically where he was at because it's patterns, and he was into patterns. So yeah, I mean, it's hard for me to listen to his recordings because he's like a rocket scientist. I love John Coltrane, but I just finished a documentary on Coltrane, and everybody talks about Love Supreme and Coltrane being very spiritual and talking very spiritual and being very, into God and peace and everything. And I get that and I love that. But as a musician, when I listen to him, especially the last stuff that he did where people were kind of like confused by it, and I'm not going to say it's noise or anything like that. As a musician, I'm watching him, and I got this impression from your record, Orange, when you sent that to me, but which is I'm comparing you with Coltrane now, which is it's cool. Okay, so but he's experimenting, man. That's all I can tell you. I think he's experimenting, and and I don't want to use the term bored as a negative word, because I think Dixieland and New Orleansy stuff was out of boredom. They were tired of playing about and they said, what if I do? They just got bored. They knew the melody so good, they started jacking around with it. And I think when I heard Orange, your record, and I remember calling you up and I said, man, you are brave. You're taking the time to say, here's my painting today, and guess what? I ain't trying to please shit. This is what's coming out of my head, and I'm an artist. And it was like Jackson Pollock, man. It's like Pollock throwing paint. You go out to the studio and you go, Jackson, what are you doing? And he's like, whack, whack, whack. And you're like, you're nuts. And then you see it and you go, wow, I didn't understand it. Well, Orange was like that for me. And then when I just saw this documentary on Coltrane, it was like, all I could say is, yeah, he was a spiritual guy. Whether that was like bringing people peace and God, that to me was over the top. All I can say is that he was experimenting with music and pushing the boundaries, making Andy Warhol, he pushed the boundaries of art. He made us all reconsider what art is. We had to reconsider once he did his thing. And Coltrane was doing that at the end, and like I said, when I heard your record Orange, I was like, man, Jim's pushing the bound. It's a brave record.
Well, thanks a lot, Pete. That's a real honor. I don't know. I mean, could we jump ahead to the Dwight Yoakam band, or
yeah.
So tell me about that.
Well, as I said, I started playing more country music. I became a country musician for hire. And there was a healthy scene in Los Angeles. There was a lot of honky-tonks, a lot of clubs, the San Fernando Valley, a lot of people with horses and horse ranches and things of that nature. So there was a lot of places to play, and I became a guitar player for hire. Dwight had moved out here. He's 9 years younger than me. And he basically, another famous guy, Jerry McGee, was his guitar player. And him and Jerry had a falling out. And Dwight was sort of stumbling around, not doing, he did gigs for a while. Here's a funny story. Do you know the Terminator movie with Arnold Schwarzenegger?
Oh, yeah.
You know the scene where he lands naked?
Yeah.
And he goes into the bar and he beats everybody up?
Yeah, it takes the leathers.
Right. That bar is called the Corral. That's the bar where they beat up Rodney King back in the day that started the riot. But that bar is called the Corral. Okay, Dwight and I separately, not knowing each other, both played the Corral quite a bit, the actual club.
Oh,
and when
boy.
Arnold goes in there to beat those guys up, you know what's on the jukebox? Guitars, Cadillacs.
Huh, I've never noticed that.
I think somebody in music supervision knew that Dwight played there, because it's on the jukebox playing. He never played the song in the bar because we didn't have it written, but he didn't have it written. But that said, it's just ironic. So I was a guitar player for hire. Dwight needed a guitar player. A mutual friend of ours named Boo Bernstein, who's a really good steel player, had been playing with Dwight and knew me. And he told Dwight, he said, hey, Pete might want to do some gigs with you. And so Boo gave me a tape of Dwight, some demos that Dwight had done. And I listened to the songs and I was really blown away by the songs. I was like, these are like the real deal. They were bluegrassy country. A couple of them were like really hardcore country, but they were bluegrassy country. And I think I Sang Dixie was on the tape. I mean, there was some stuff on there. And I was like impressed with the song. So I said, well, let me meet this guy. And he said, I'm going to do this big honky-tonk line dance club, and I need to shore up my band. So do you want to go play with me? Jerry's not in the band anymore. So I went. The drummer was Ed Green, and that means nothing to you, but Ed Green's son is Brian Austin Green from Beverly Hills 91201. He's an actor who's now, famous. Anyway, so it's Hollywood, right? So we had this band, and we went and played this big club with a full band. And then after that gig, that was a Sunday gig, then Dwight said, I want to go out and play some more honky tonks. So I was like, cool. So we pared it down to a 4-piece band. We had Jeff Donovan on drums, who's on the first record. He had an engineer friend of his named Gordon Shryock on bass, who was engineering and trying to do demos with Dwight, but that didn't last too long. He left, and we got J.D. Foster on bass, and Dwight and myself, we had a 4-piece, and then we added Brantley Kearns on fiddle and started playing and learning Dwight's songs at the same time.